Hello, and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. Please note, topics and stocks discussed in this podcast are not financial or investment advice. Today's guest is Simon Lill, the non-executive chairman at Iris Metals. Simon has over 35 years experience in stockbroking, business development and startups in the manufacturing and resource sectors. He is also the current non-executive chairman at De Grey Mining. Now, Iris Metals is an exploration mining company focused on lithium in South Dakota in the United States of America. On the show, Simon discussed the processes of complying with the Australian Stock Exchange and how the company is positioned for listing again. Simon elaborated on the projects Iris Metals is prioritising, how they are working with the local community and the North American lithium market. I hope you enjoy listening. So hello and welcome to the Market Bull podcast. I'm your host, Ben Kostrich, and joining me on the show today is Simon Lill, the non-executive chairman at Iris Metals. The name may be familiar. He's also involved in De Grey Mining as the non-executive chairman. So welcome to the show, Simon.
Thanks, Ben. Good to be here.
And I was going to say your list of experience is rather extended. We were just saying before, 35 years, probably longer in ASX companies and stockbroking and just everything resources, being a WA boy. But before we dive into all that, Iris Metals, give us a bit of a story about that company and how you've been progressing through developing that.
Yes, look, as we discussed earlier, Iris is it's at an interesting stage in that we're going through re-compliance, which is chapters 1 and 2 of the listing rules at the ASX. We've only just really received the full approvals from the ASX, and you'll have seen there was an announcement last Friday about our plans. There was a notice of meeting that has come out as we require shareholder approval to change from the company that we were to the company that we're becoming. So it really got to change of commodity from gold exploration to lithium, change of jurisdiction from Australia to South Dakota, and to an extent change of scale as we have acquired patented claims which are akin in the Australian terms to a mining lease. So they were the three issues that the ASX knocked us out on, if you like, and have requested that we recomply. So we need to be careful with what we move forward with because we will have a prospectus coming through next week as well. It should be lodged next week and be live in a couple of weeks. We can't conclude the recompliance until we have the shareholder approval. That shareholder meeting, I think, is on the 5th of May, and we would hope to have everything in place to get ourselves relisted shortly thereafterwards. Even at that point, I won't say we're in the lap of the gods, that's incorrect, but we will need ASX approval for things like shareholder spread, which is required again for recompliance purposes, escrow agreements, etc. So there'll still be a delay, but that's roughly the timetable at the moment.
And we should note that we're recording this today on Wednesday, the 5th of April, and it sounds like there's going to be a lot of activity over the coming weeks, really, and as we said, a few announcements in the previous few weeks. But give us a bit of an insight into what Iris Metals is and what the company is sort of focusing on now with its realignment of attention.
Yes, look, we've been fortunate that we've come across this land package in South Dakota. Custer's sort of the nearest major city. It's proximal to Mount Rushmore as a site that people would be more familiar of in that region. In looking around as to what we might do in the lithium space, so the lithium market's clearly in the last 18 months been very, very strong. It's had its recent downs, but overall been very significant in the ASX perspective. I don't personally always like jumping onto the new bandwagon of lithium, etc., but there was clearly a lot more depth to this change. And we had the opportunity. We thought, okay, well, let's look at lithium. We did some drilling on our gold projects in the northeastern goldfields. There was a couple of interesting sniffs, nothing that was really holding together. So we came across this lithium opportunity due to contacts that we have in South Dakota. Well, actually, they weren't in South Dakota, apologies, in South America, but they knew these people in South Dakota. And our geologist, Chris Connell, went to South Dakota, met with the contacts that we'd been given, hit it off with these people, and was able to put this package of land together. Now, Chris has put the package of land together because of one contact in South Dakota in particular, who has been able to introduce him to various owners of some of the claims. This contact had also held on to a number of claims himself, and we've bought claims from him as well. So it was the main introduction into the region. And we've now put together quite a large package of land in the South Dakota region. So,
And that was a point we touched on before about the ability to work really well with local communities, and we touched on it before with this looming ESG compliance. But how impactful has Chris been in developing those sorts of relationships? And as we said, like, you need to make sure those foundations are to begin with. Otherwise, you can really have a bit of a struggle with this modern day mining exploration outlook.
I think Chris has been absolutely critical, and he knows. I give him a lot of credit when we're presenting together, presenting the story together, that I always put it that we're not a group of geologists from Subiaco or West Perth trying to run something in South Dakota. Chris has spent quite a lot of time over there with the locals, getting to know the locals. He's happy to be there. He and his partner are probably moving there once they get all the right visas in place for 12 to 18 months. From the S side of ESG, the social side, he's developed good relationships, and he's the type of guy that, he's happy at the bar, having a few beers with the guys. He's happy helping them look after their babies, for example. He has done some babysitting for them. It's really interesting. It is so important. And in South Dakota, they're apparently quite a Christian area, quite a religious area. It's in the flyover states, as they call it, and you can interpret that as you will. And Chris has fitted in very well with them all. It is absolutely critical. Apart from that, he's also a good geologist, and he knows what he's looking at. And to say, is he excited about the project ahead of him? Yes, he would say he's never seen a better walk-up target in his time.
And it's focused on lithium. And I mean, a point before, I know Australians, we're almost some of the most successful miners, and everyone likes to work with us. And I guess our culture really does embody that, we get along with everyone really, really well, which I don't think comes as a surprise. But when we're talking about lithium, there's this real demand globally. I mean, probably your first time being in this sort of real emergence of lithium. I know you've been involved in gold, but from that point of view, I mean, how much urgency does that bring on for, especially in the US side of things, setting up these explorations and finding resources and just the whole lithium market in a nutshell?
So what we have in the States is, which adds to the excitement, we have what they're called patented claims. So there are different structures in the States, and I can say some of it's a little bit archaic compared to how we run our mining leases, exploration licenses, prospecting licenses over here. You actually physically have to peg the ground to get a BLM claim. 4 pegs on each corner, 1 peg in the middle, and you've got to identify dates, et cetera, on it. So to buy a patented claim, that has already got its approvals, it's an ownership, it's got, it's not a mining lease, but it's effectively a mining lease, if I can put it like that. And that's in South Dakota. As far as we know, we are the only company to have a hard rock mining license effectively in the States for lithium. We are certainly in a pegmatite area. If you wanted to go to Wikipedia, and look up pegmatite crystals, spodumene crystals, it will take you to South Dakota, and it will take you to one of the mines, which we don't own actually. I think it takes you to the Etta mine, where they have mined pegmatites, but it's the world's largest pegmatite crystal. I think it's 7 meters long, maybe half a ton of virtually pure spodumene. So the area is known for lithium, for spodumene, pegmatites, and we are fortunate that we own and control a couple of mining leases effectively via patent claims in South Dakota.
Yeah, and I mean the stage of acquiring these landmarks and this area for exploration, what was some of the process involved in getting that underway?
Sometimes you don't always want to talk about the trade secrets, and sometimes it can be a bit convoluted as well. Look, once we decided to get into the area, once we'd established the contacts that we've had, you know, if you're going to go in, you go all in. It's something that a mate of mine's taught me, that if you think you're onto something, you need to tie up the whole trend. We did that at De Grey Mining. We bought half of our package from a Chinese group, and that was really painful at the time, but it's been very invaluable for us. So we control a lot of ground in that De Grey trend up in the Pilbara. So same thing there. Once we had our foot in there, we've applied for quite a lot of BLMs. I can't give you the exact number. Just putting those claims together cost us quite a penny. Buying the patented claims, it has cost us quite a lot of money to put that package together. But we've been fortunate. We've had some good financial backers on the way through, who've been very supportive of what we are doing as well. Probably in more recent times, one of the financial backers that's come on board is a group called Waratah Electric. They've come in as a shareholder through their decarbonisation fund. I won't get that name 100% correct, but they are quite well known in the North American market. It has been in the battery sector, the EV sector as they call it. They've been quite significant in the lithium sector, and if you've been significant in the lithium sector over the last 3 years, you've made good money. So they know the sector, they know what they're doing. They've put in $1.5 million to Iris, and they put that in knowing that we were being suspended. It came in after we suspended, actually, and we're comfortable with that. And they've also confirmed that they'll put another $2 million in at the prospectus, the IPO level, if you like. Effectively, we go through a new IPO process. So to have that sort of support behind us to start with, it was pretty exciting too.
It's a good, in a way, acknowledgement that there is something there. And when you're looking at exploration, it's a good point that you mentioned, like you have to go all in, and realistically, you don't want to look back and regret that you didn't. And it's more, it might be initially a bit annoying or a bit sort of costly, and there's those implications. But yeah, if you look at it from a long-term perspective, and I think the benefit, especially being in lithium and all the movements in America and even Canada and that whole region of the world, is there's this massive push. And, we talked about it briefly beforehand, but the Inflation Reduction Act that America or Biden is rolling out, there's huge sums of money in regards to processing and going down this electric vehicle avenue. And I mean, it's not necessarily something that you may be involved in yet. I can imagine there's conversations about it, because it's an awesome amount of money realistically, but it's also a sign of the future of where the industry is going. And I mean, when you're looking at that sort of big picture, I mean, what does that sort of mean for you and the company, looking at the way that lithium is setting itself up as really the only future for electric batteries?
We have a lot of people saying, oh, you must do this, you must do that straight away. I think at the moment we have the attitude that we've got to walk before we can run. And that means a few things. It means that we've got to go through this recompliance process, get ourselves relisted. That's one of the most important things for our shareholders. That involves raising more capital on the way through as well. So that is critical to us. We need to understand better what we have. We've got some walk-up targets that we think we can create or convert, I should say, to resources with suitable drilling over, I might say 6 months, one geologist might say 12 months, but that sort of time frame. So let's see how much of that there is. We are an Australian company. Chris is doing a fantastic job in South Dakota, but we don't have enough knowledge about the US, probably the US mining world, but also the US opportunities through funding. What we do know is that there are clearly a lot of funds available for critical minerals, and I can point to Ioneer, I think are listed on the ASX. They had a funding package put together. They're a lithium clay project. I think they're in Nevada. I can point to Lynas, which is a West Australian company that's looking at a processing facility in the States that's been funded by soft loans. If I don't get this 100% correct, please don't shoot me, but I know they've received funding. Trying to think, Piedmont Lithium have got funding for their projects. So there is clearly, and these aren't small amounts of funds, they're significant amounts of funds. We think once we can show what we have, we've got to put a drill hole into the thing first, but once we can show what we believe we have, that we have hard rock mining licenses that were in the centre of the USA, yes, there should be those monies available. There should be a lot of investment interest in us as well. I can say certainly the South Dakota people that personally I have not met them, but Chris tells me they are very, very patriotic. And the States is renowned in general for its patriotism. So I think when they see that they can invest in their own project within their states, we expect that there'd be investment coming through. Now, what does that mean to an Australian company from Perth? We've got to be conscious that we're becoming more of a US we are a US project. We are going to become more of a US company, and we need to adjust ourselves as we move forward from a management point of view, from a board point of view, maybe even from a listed point of view. These things aren't going to happen overnight. They don't need to happen overnight. But I think that once we get ourselves relisted, that probably becomes the next stage of the planning over the next, call it 6 to 12 months.
The idea of being nimble and flexible, because I know especially in mining, there's a lot of resources required to pursue certain drills or certain areas, and the idea that, you're locked into a certain frame of mind if it's, this area, or if it's even the board or the management, or potentially the listing that you're on. It's really important, especially these days with the ever-changing market, to be aware of. You need to be able to shift really quite quickly and effectively. But I mean, when you're looking at this whole process of relisting it and doing the IPO, there's probably a lot of factors going in there, and the prospectus will come out in the coming weeks. But I mean, once that's all underway, are there sorts of timelines and objectives and goals to get accomplished as soon as you're back up and running? Or is that, again, being a bit too preemptive, because the priority now is to, again, get the prospectus done and show what's going to be achieved?
No, look, I mean, there is a level of work we've been able to do on the ground over in Dakota, and we've got soil sample results. We've got a rig ready to go to start drilling. We do have walk-up targets. The pegmatitic expressions are at surface. The area has been mined. There's a series of mines there. It used to be mined mainly for feldspar and beryl, which are associated with pegmatites. They did mine for pegmatites back in World War II, 41 to 45 or thereabouts. Is when the mining was done. We all know when World War II was, but when the mining was done, and that was apparently for use as a lubricant during the war machine. So they have mined the area before. It does have a very strong mining culture, South Dakota. The Homestake mine, I don't recall the name of it, but they've taken 40 million ounces out of it over a period of time. That's just up the road from us. And there is another operating gold mine in the region as well. So it's got a strong mining culture as well.
And really the way that America, or even almost all economies are operating, is they're all looking to have resources or their supply chain within their backyard. And I think, Australia's pretty fortunate that we can work pretty happily with all different countries and everyone's happy to trade with us. But I know, especially in America, there's a lot of political tensions with other countries and jurisdictions, that there's this real importance for them to get mining and exploration and embed their supply chain back into their front yard, like they're doing with building all these manufacturing facilities. So from a long-term outlook, that's got to give Iris Metals a bit of a nice tailwind in regards to knowing that there's going to be this probably support from not just the people, as you mentioned, but the country, the government, and the whole sort of outlook of there.
But it creates an interesting discussion in that a lot of people say, oh, well, you should be able to do DSO, direct shipping ore. And yet what we think we probably can. We're not going to start where we need to look into it. We need to understand what it looks like. We need to understand whether we need to treat the ore first. We need to understand what the weathering profile is like of the pegmatites that are at surface versus what might be deeper. So it does require some drilling. But where do we take the DSO ore to? And where are most of the facilities for the material is in China. Now, the US aren't going to give us money to send product to China. So we need, in one sense, some of those facilities that have been touted in the US to catch up. On the other side, the price of lithium is such that it does sustain a reasonable amount of travel, transport costs, etc. And if we were to upgrade what we have, what we believe we have, I should say, it will sustain transport costs fairly comfortably. We're in a region, as I said, that it's known for having the largest pegmatite crystals. I think they're the largest mineral crystals, but I don't really want to be quoted on that because I could be wrong there. So there's strong crystalline, so it will lend itself to dense separation, as they say, and it should upgrade quite easily, and you should be able to put together a very high-grade product. But it's something we're looking into. It's not something we're sort of saying, right, we're going to do DSO within the next 3 months. We've got to walk before we can run.
Yeah, and I mean, that's a key to understand, because I can imagine going through the process you're going through, you have to be very particular, and yeah, anything can be taken out of context, especially in the world we live in nowadays, and you want to be very articulate and spot on with what you're saying. And I mean, I'm familiar a little bit with the story, but you've built this team, or this management team, and you said that there potentially might be changes, but can you shed a bit of insight into the people that have been a part of this journey and building up Iris Metals?
Yeah, so the two colleagues that first approached me, two gentlemen from Melbourne, Tao Paneth and Peter Marks. Tao's quite a young go-getter, a lot of energy, a lot of enthusiasm, a young, intelligent man. Peter Marks and I were the old war horses on the board. They're very well connected within their community in Melbourne, and that's certainly been a source of funding as we got ourselves through the IPO and beyond that, actually. So I then introduced Chris Connell to the company. At the time, certainly in the West Australian sense, or in the Australian sense, good geologists were hard to find. Chris has been working at Sol Gold, which has the large Ecuadorian gold copper project, but he'd been unable to get across there as an exploration geologist during the COVID pandemic, and was happy to come on board as a non-executive director initially to give him something to do, to give him the opportunity to go into the northeastern goldfields, which was what we listed on. And through that Ecuadorian connection into South America, back to South Dakota, is really how we came across the lithium project, then helped by Chris getting on a plane and going to South Dakota and working with the Melbourne connections and putting the whole package together as we have discussed. So that's the team that remains on the board. I've got 3 executive directors. I'm the non-executive chairman. the board knows it needs to change, and it will be adjusting as we move forward and become more of an American company.
And we touched on it before, was the similarities or potentially differences between operating in America and even Australia. From your perspective, being worked in both, or emerging now into America, what are you noticing are similarities, differences, or in a way, realistically, they're minerals in the ground, but both countries operate completely differently in regards to getting it out and even applying to get it.
Look, certainly I think we're lucky to be, we're not lucky where we are where we are. We're fortunate to be in South Dakota, which has a strong mining culture, which we touched on earlier. I don't know enough about the states as a whole. I know there are some states that can be really difficult and you don't want to be in them. Other states aren't too bad. I think in a Western Australian context, there are a lot of rules and regulations, but if you work your way through, you will get to the end point. So we at De Grey are doing that. Maybe in the States, it's quite as clear cut as that the environmental lobby is very strong over there. Less so, we think, in South Dakota, but there is some lobby there that we need to be aware of. Obviously, we have very good miners in Western Australia. Are they as good at miners? Is it as comprehensive? They're a very intelligent country and a very intelligent people. They probably are. I think, in reality, I don't know enough about the space to talk about it too knowledgeably, but...
And I mean, that's sort of the naivety from my point of view, being born and bred in Perth, is I always picture America, but I don't quite think of the mining industry. It's not the first one that comes to mind. I think of so many other sorts of tech and biotech and even just manufacturing, and mining isn't necessarily the first sector that jumps out to me. But I think now, especially with the movements of America trying to bring it all back home and this sort of push to start mining again, there's this, again, urgency to get these projects up and about. And it sounds that, it's fortunate and a good opportunity where RS Metals is positioned to leverage those opportunities and chances and the tailwind, which is inevitable in these lithium car batteries and electric vehicles and who knows what else. We haven't even touched on, the trade network of, boats becoming electric and cars and planes and trucks. And there's a whole host of applications for lithium. And, the resources, the demand is well short of the current supply, well, other way around rather. Demand is so high and there's not much supply. So there's this real encouragement to get these operations up and about. And I think for listeners that want to learn more about RS Metals, is there somewhere they can go or contact and just follow the projects and the company's operations?
Look, obviously you can go to our website. That should be reasonably up to date at the moment. We had to wait until we had the ASX approvals and released our ASX announcement, which went out last Friday. The prospectus is a source of information, of course. That should be very up to date. There's independent technical reports about the geology and the region, etc. within that. So that should be out sometime next week, assuming this goes out sooner than next week.
Yes, yeah.
Of course. And then it'll be ASX releases. And we've got a lot of people that are quite interested in what's happening. We will try and move those releases through relatively quickly. So it's a matter of watching the ASX platform. There's been a problem in Western Australia and Australia, and it's been a global issue about getting assays released quickly. And, there was certainly a massive backlog for the assay labs in Australia. It seems to have unwound a bit, but I'm not going to guarantee between drilling and getting the assays. It's still going to be, I would think, a 4 to 6 week period in the States. We're not sending the material back to Perth. It'll be assayed in the States. They've got all of those facilities over there, of course. But it could be, from drilling to getting those results back, it could be 4 to 6 weeks.
Okay. Well, it sounds like there's a lot going on, and I can imagine you've got a lot more to accomplish in the next coming weeks and even this year for RS Metals. So I thank you for taking the time to speak with me on the show today, and look forward to hearing the updates on how the company's progressing.
Thanks, Ben. It's been a pleasure.
Thanks for listening to the Market Bull podcast. If you enjoyed it, please make sure to like and subscribe. You can follow the Market Bull on our socials at Twitter and LinkedIn by searching The Market Bull. You can also subscribe to our newsletter on the website by visiting www.themarketbull.com.au.